Didn't like that, we need to change that next time. But also to look at how the team worked, to say we really had fun there. I hated what we did over here. How can we do that better next time? So it's simple, really. All projects have just 3 steps. But how you go about those 3 steps is the key. It's simple, but it's not easy. There are a range of NLP tools and techniques that we've already heard about this morning. I'd like to share some of the things that have worked for me in my project experience. The logical levels really helped unstick a big problem that a leadership team in a French manufacturing site had. As with most organisations, they had a monthly planning meeting, a review meeting. Talking to the project managers on that site, they really hated the meetings. They felt the leadership team really wasn't interested. They were lacking in direction, and they felt really undervalued and left alone to get on with it. So we went through a logical levels exercise with the leadership team to help them to understand what their purpose really was to being there as leaders and in terms of the project process. And I went back a couple of months later to talk to the same project managers I'd spoken to. And it was really marked, the difference. Firstly, their shoulders were more relaxed. They said they've actually enjoyed sometimes these meetings. But most importantly, they felt their leaders were actually interested in what they were doing, supportive, and giving them direction where it was needed. It was a big turnaround for them. I found it very effective to use well-formed outcomes in goal setting during projects. It's a really effective way of quickly coming to a shared and common endpoint. And a simple tool that I've been amazed by how powerful this can be, anchoring. Meetings at one company are always the same. You'd come into the meeting, sit down in the same places, have the same discussions. The meetings were confrontational, really tense. People got quite worked up. One meeting, I decided to sit in the space that the person who was the most confrontational always sat in. So I got there a bit early, sat down in their seat, which meant that everyone else coming into the room had to choose somewhere else to sit. The meeting started, and the feeling of the meeting was so much more tranquil. There was less in the way of confrontational discussion. The meeting was less tense, people were a bit more relaxed. So I was stunned by the difference that little change made. So I keep doing it now, and I still get stunned by how much difference that really does make. I write an electronic bulletin that I send out roughly every month. With a recent issue, I decided to take the opportunity to rewrite the bulletin into a more conversational style. At the same time, I took care to make sure that we had a good balance between visual, auditory and kinesthetic descriptors and language in each article in the bulletin. And I created an introduction to the bulletin that has a little bit of discussion that builds rapport, hopefully, with the readers. I thought, okay, I'll put these tools into practice, see what happens. I sent the bulletin out, and I was really, really quite stunned, actually, at how high the click rate suddenly became. People clicking through to read the whole articles. I started getting some great feedback from the readers. We entered into conversations and arguments sometimes about the things we've been talking about. There was a massive difference for me between previous bulletins and suddenly the real engagement that people had, purely because of understanding representational systems. And I've mentioned quite a few of these, but in yet another project planning meeting, always the same thing happened in this particular place, always firefighting. Sorting out the problems from the week before, problems that had come up the day before. We were doing what we'd always done, and surprise, surprise, getting what we always had done before. During a break in one meeting, having heard about and learnt about metaphors, I thought, I'll give this a go. So I jokingly remarked that even woodlice learn. A couple of minutes later, the meeting picked up again. I was really surprised that one of the people who never speaks in the meeting stood up and said, what about if we put a rolling plan on this wall for the next 2 to 3 weeks? We could use post-its, so we can move tasks around as things change. And we can look over the 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and see where there's going to be problems and do something about them before they become really painful. So you may be wondering now, how the NLP tools and these 3 project steps I've talked about fit together. Well, here we are. Sadly, I haven't got time to go into the detail of how each of them works today. But just to very briefly give you an idea, in the discovery stage, logical levels and well-formed outcomes hopefully speak for themselves. During defining the plan, we use timeline, rapport, and anchors to get to a very concise and shared view of what we're doing. In allocating roles, the Milton and the meta models are incredibly powerful at getting people to a really, really good understanding of what they're there to do and how they're going to commit. And in the parameters change steps, we find that rapport and communication are absolutely key to getting everyone to the same understanding of what's happening, what's changing, and also getting to a really deep exploration of why those changes are necessary. I've had the opportunity to put all this into practice in writing a book with Martin over a 6-month period. We've been able to write the book following this process, clarify how the process works, and test it in some very challenging situations and working styles. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Here is the book. So I've talked a bit about what I've done and how the NLP tools and techniques I've used have dramatically changed how I work on projects. I've shared with you the development of this process and application of the tools. And for me, it's meant my projects have gone from being the same as everyone else's to now being 100% successful. That's right, 100% successful now. What if you tried this process, put this process into place for your project, and got 100% success? What would that feel like? Maybe you've got questions. Let's take the opportunity now to go through them.
Hi, when you first introduced some of the techniques, say for example, logical levels, did you find any resistance amongst your team members to wanting to do something new?
Yes. Next question, no. I was, I guess, in the lucky position that I was just learning about them myself. And I tried framing at the beginning of the first time I tried this, saying, I've just learned about this process, this tool. Can we have some fun and give it a go, see what happens? And people were up for that. I think it may have been that honesty of saying, I'm learning this myself at that time. Now the approach is more, I'm saying that I find this works with other projects. Let's give it a go. What's the worst that happens? We do what we always did and we still get what we always did.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you advocating the complete eradication of Gantt charts from any organisation, or is it just another tool in the toolbox?
It's definitely just another tool in the toolbox, along with everything else you have to manage or lead a project effectively.
When you work with new organisations who haven't sort of experienced your experiences with this type of system, how much persuasion do you have to use in order to convince them that your way is actually going to work?
I find very similar to what I've just been sharing with you now, sharing the experiences and the difference that's made for me and the projects I work on, that it's been incredibly powerful. Rather than having to try and go and sell a methodology or anything like that. It's really sharing experiences and them seeing how they could possibly start using it in their own companies. It's opening up possibilities. Any other questions?